What you're about to see is my very first outdoor round of the 2024 season, and I'm going to show you how I was trying to approach this so that I could start the season by breaking 80. One of the things I'm trying to be very conscious of this season is having and sticking to a pre-shot routine. The simplest form I like is to take a practice swing beside the ball so I get a feel of what the grass is like, and then I ensure that I stand behind the ball and try to visualize my shot shape. And instead of trying to be too aggressive to start my season, I just chose an iron that I knew I could get into the fairway, and I hit a nice little draw with that 6-iron. And if I'm going to start strong with this season, I want to ensure that I don't lose that pre-shot routine by only the second shot. So I take my practice swing, look behind the ball, and you'll notice that for me, I'm very comfortable having two little waggles there before I set the club down and swing away. And you'll notice that I was aimed off a bit to the left of that tree overhang because I was trying to draw it around into the green. It didn't draw, it ended up going straight though and missed in a nice safe spot. Oh, and don't forget, repair those divots. That left me with a chip onto the green, and I didn't get as close as I would have liked here, so I've given myself a pretty lengthy attempt to save par. But in all honesty, on the very first hole of my very first round of this season, I'm not worried about two-putting for a possible bogey here, which is why I think it's very important to have realistic expectations, because that's exactly what I did. I leave that first putt short, and I tap in for the bogey, but I'm happy. Now as you take a look at hole 2, which is a very straight par 5, I'm going to let you know that there are a couple stats I'm looking to count for this round. I'm going to keep track of my greens in regulation, how many putts I miss short, how many 3 putts I have, and how many times I stick to my pre-shot routine. Which you'll notice here is the first time that I don't completely do it, as I only have one waggle before I swing away. But thankfully, I bombed this drive. What a beauty. So for this second shot, I was left about 250 or so yards away from the green, which for me, I would have to hit an absolutely perfect 3-wood to get there. So I decided to club down to my 5-wood and just take a nice easy swing, trying to leave myself somewhere within 100 yards of the green. And that's exactly what I did. But unfortunately, dang it, I forgot to hit record on that pitch shot, but it's a nice one. I don't know, looks like it might be about 7-8 feet. There it is there. So it worked out really nice. Soft grass. Let's try and drain that. So even though the third shot wasn't actually recorded, at least this was officially my first green in regulation of the season. Go me! And while I would be absolutely ecstatic to have a birdie on the second hole, you'll notice that I leave this one short just like on the first one. And spoiler alert, you're going to hear me say that a lot today. But I'm not going to be upset with a tap-in par. And one of the things I love about golf is just as things seem like they're going to be relatively straightforward and somewhat easy, it reminds you this is still a tough game. Now, none of my videos are sponsored by anybody, but if that splash was sponsored by anything, it would be my lack of pre-shot routine and topping the ball. Thankfully, Crosswinds has a generous drop zone, so I'm actually not in a terrible position. It's going to be hard for me to try and get a par here, but I go back to my pre-shot routine, I took a look, couple waggles, nice easy swing with the 5-wood again, and got a little bit of a draw on that. And although I end up a little bit short right of the green, I thankfully missed this bunker, because even mid-season, I do not have a lot of confidence out of the sand, and that helped me make the decision to not try and get too cute with a flop shot on this approach. Instead, I just did a gentle pitch, leaving myself past the pin, because being anywhere on the green would be way better at this situation than flubbing it and ending up in the sand. Now, if you're going to break 80, one of the obvious things you need to do is putt well. Anytime I have a downhill putt, I ensure that I look at the hole from the low side because you can see the break a lot easier that way. I was also hoping on this one that my playing partner would have a little bit better attempt at his putt so I could see some more of the break, but he had a rough go at it. Thankfully, I had a pretty good read on it from looking on the other side. That's a tap in for double bogey to leave me +3 through 3. One of the things I like about Crosswinds is that it starts with a pretty fun layout. A par 4, a par 5, a par 4, and now we're back to another par 5. So even though I pull this tee shot into the right rough, I'm not too frustrated with it, because I'm not going for the green at this point anyway. You'll see on the layout here from my app that I'm trying to go about 170 yards into the left fairway. And I don't know if it was that weird little extra pump I did on my club there or the wet grass, but I pulled this one hard to the right and it went into this little tree area. And as you can see, I'm not sure this is going to end up very well. But thankfully, it was okay. And I apologize for this weird camera angle, but it's because there's a bunker directly behind the camera and I'm on this uphill slope. So you'll just have to enjoy this view of my pasty white chicken legs and this fist pump to assure you that the shot ended up really good. That makes my second green in regulation, both in par 5s, and I've left myself a really good shot at a birdie putt here again. I do ensure that I clean off the ball, which I think I noticed I hadn't done the last couple holes, and it's a very muddy day. I line up to the putt, give it a good stroke, and it's short. And you can tell I'm already noticing this pattern that I do not want to continue, but a tap-in par is a tap-in par. And that brings us to the first par 3 of the day, which is easily one of the nicest holes at this course. It's a fairly large circular green, but you notice you have to cover water almost the entire way, and as an additional challenge, they even have a bunker right at the front. And because I'm playing whites today, this is not a very long hole, but I didn't compensate for how much wind was blowing directly into my face. I clubbed up 1, but should have clubbed up 2, and I ended up a little bit short. Thankfully, I had a hard time seeing it past the bunker, which gives me a chance to show off my ridiculously high vertical. Oh yeah! This seems like a good time to mention if you're still watching this video, I would really appreciate it if you could click like and or subscribe so that maybe I can get some calf lessons. But although my legs aren't great, my lag putt is actually quite good here, and it's a little bit short, but I don't mind that one at all because it leaves a really nice easy tap-in par on a tricky hole. I enter the 6th hole feeling pretty confident on back-to-back pars, which is important because this is another tricky hole. In particular, you need to have a nice straight drive. There's not a lot of room to miss to the left, but thankfully there's a little bit more room to miss to the right because that's what I did. And because I felt pretty good with the shots I've had with my 5-wood today, I pulled it out again, and although it didn't end up great, I've given myself a chance to pitch on and still try to save a par. In pursuit of breaking 80, one of the things you really need to make sure you're doing is not worrying too much about taking a bogey. If you miss the green in regulation, your goal should just be to get on the green with that very next shot. The ball rolled out a little bit further than I thought it was going to, so it leaves me a bit of an uphill putt. But thankfully, as I walked to the hole, I noticed there was a big clump of grass that was there, so I did decide to move that and clean off my ball again. And even though I've left a lot of my putts short today, which has been a little bit disappointing, it has given me confidence that at least I'm around the hole. I'm not missing these things really far or really short, so I step up to this one with a bit of confidence, hoping to save a par. And I do. What a great putt. That one felt really good. And as we enter hole 7, the great game of golf reminds us to never let the highs get you too high or the lows get you too low, because you never know what the next shot has in store for you. This is a short par 4 that with a good drive, you can be less than 100 yards into the green. But unfortunately, I pull this one into the right rough, and you'll notice I have a really tricky second shot here. From looking behind the ball, I wasn't really sure if I'd be able to get it up high enough to clear the edge of this tree, so I took a look from the other side and decided to try. And I didn't quite hit this 60 degree as well as I should have, but I got really lucky that it snuck its way through the pines and somehow ended up on the green. And fresh on the heels of making a really good par putt, I go back to my old tricks, leave this one about 2 feet short, tap in for a par, which is good because the very next hole is a nearly 200-yard par 3, and for me, it's the toughest on the course. And maybe that got in my head because you'll notice that my pre-shot routine has 1, 2, 3, and a half waggles. And while I've been able to avoid any major disasters so far, I do realize when I spray this one a little bit left that the importance of my pre-shot routine cannot be overstated. At this point in the round, I've done it on fewer than 50% of my shots, so that's certainly something that moving forward I need to make more of a conscious effort of. I do pitch onto the green here and leave myself a chance for a long par save, but I leave this one, surprise, short. It's a little bit shorter than my other ones, and I do have to take some extra time on this one because it's not just a regular tap-in, but I'm really glad I did because a bogey is always better than a double bogey, and that keeps my hopes of breaking 80 alive. And as we enter the 9th hole here, my main goal is to get a par because I don't want to string bogeys back to back, and I don't set myself up for success very well here by pulling this drive right into the trees. Thankfully in that area it's pretty open, and I do take a look here at possibly going for the green by trying to split that gap between the trees, but common sense prevails for me, and I decide that I don't want to blow up my round completely, so I'm just going to take a 4-iron and try and punch it underneath the trees to get myself back into the fairway. And it's not a great attempt because I do clip some of the branches, but when I take a look at where it ended up, it's going to have to be good enough. I left myself about 100 yards into the green. I hit a pretty good 56 degree wedge here, but I did leave it off a little bit to the left, so it was going to be a very tricky putt to try and save another par. But again, I'm very proud of myself here by not getting too worried about this putt, that I already acknowledge, even if I 2-putt and take the bogey, it's not ideally what I wanted out of the hole, but again, it's still not a double bogey and still no 3-putts through that front 9. As we take a quick look at my 9-hole stats, I'm sitting at +5 and only hitting a third of the greens in regulation. And although I haven't 3-putted yet, having 7 putts missed short is definitely something I need to improve on this back 9. As we can tell from pulling that 3-wood, the pre-shot routine is also something I need to be a lot more conscious of. Even though it's cut from this video, I did follow it this time, and I pushed the shot a little bit left. That was largely because I was trying to avoid the trees. It's not ideal to start the back 9 in a similar fashion that I finished the front. Being able to quickly forget disappointing holes is going to be a very important thing if I'm trying to break 80 consistently, so I can't let it stay in my head as I leave that pitch shot short and leave another putt short, tapping in for a bogey. But don't get discouraged as you are grinding away trying to break 80 because, like we've said already, golf is a funny game and you never know what the next opportunity might be. In this case, it's a par 5, trying to shake off those bogey vibes. And even though I missed this fairway, I've been pretty pleased with myself today that all of my misses have just been a little bit off. This ball was sitting up just well enough that I felt really confident pulling out my 5-wood, and although I missed the green, it's just off into the right fringe. I've got a putt for eagle. Okay, the heartbeat sound effect was a bit dramatic, but I haven't had a lot of chances to use it. And that is our first birdie of the day. Flap those wings! And when the goal on the day is just to break 80, getting a birdie is massive. So I'm feeling pretty confident here coming up to this par 4, knowing that there's a lot of room here to use my driver again. And considering I've been missing right most of the times, I aimed left here and just tried to play off of that draw. And this ended up being the nicest drive of my day. And one of the things that I would like to just note here is that I really haven't hit a lot of fairways off the tee. A lot of my shots have missed a bit to the right, and I think it's important to highlight that, because when you're trying to break 80, you have to remember that your game does not need to be perfect. Overcoming the bad shots is just as important as hitting good ones. Now that being said, I just had a perfect drive and a near perfect approach shot. I just barely came up short of the green here, but missing short on this one is actually pretty good because you have a nice look at the hole and I just miss it by. But that's the kind of miss I'm trying to make with my putts. Just a foot or two past the hole, that was a really good attempt. So that brings it into this par 3 and I'm feeling pretty good about my shots right now. In particular, the last few holes I've been sticking more to my routine and you'll notice here I've got 1 waggle, 2 waggles, set that club down, and let's get after it. Little bit of a pull, but at least I stuck to the routine. Just short right. And that sets me up with another opportunity to lag a good putt up there. Again, I'm trying not to leave it short, and it's just a bit short. I'll still count that one against my stats just to see how it looks at the end of the round, but I'm honestly not upset about that one because it was a tough read going up that little bit of a ridge. I now know that for the last 5 holes, if I can play them in +2 or better, I will break 80. And on this hole, there is water down the left-hand side, so I play it very conservative off to the right a little bit, which ends up being a nice little baby fade and ends up in the fairway with only about 100 yards to the hole, which is a very comfortable 56 degree for me. Another key to shooting lower scores is to not worry about always going the furthest possible with every shot, but instead trying to leave yourself at a distance where you can hit a very confident stroke. I did that here and was all over the pin, but it just went a little bit longer than I expected because I didn't really compensate for the wind. But my putting on this back 9 has been much improved. As you can see, I just burned the edge of that hole and it's another easy tap-in par. I now have 4 holes to go and only trying to be +2 in these. And this is a short par 5 that I'm trying to hit the same fade as I just did on the previous tee. But I pulled this one. So it's a bit disappointing because I could have got really aggressive on the second shot here. And I know this clip is going to look a little bit long compared to the other shots I've shown, but I do want to show the sequence that I went through here because it's a great example of the old adage, play smarter, not harder. I'm only about 210 yards to the green here, and I know that my 5-wood is enough to make it. But if you notice that the ball was a little bit down in the rough, and I'm on a slope, so the ball's a bit below my feet. So just before I committed to that shot, I had this image that it might have just smashed right into the hill in front of me, and it would have left me with a really long third shot in. So I clubbed down to an 8-iron here, and I just decided to pop it out, try and leave it about 100 yards into the green again, and it worked out lovely. And I really wish that I would have followed it up with something nice, but unfortunately, that's where the good stuff ends on this hole. as not only was I playing into the wind here, but I was having a hard time seeing where the pin was actually sitting on the green, so I didn't know how aggressive to be. I ended up quite short here, so I did leave myself with a chance to lag the putt, but I honestly don't know what happened on this one. I had such great momentum with that putter, and this one is way shorter than I should ever leave it. At this point, I'm kind of in my head and getting a little bit frustrated that I've left this long par attempt on a par 5, and I really don't like giving a bogey away on these holes, so that's a really disappointing tap in. That means to break 80, I can only get one bogey on these final 3 holes, and this par 4 really isn't very challenging. The key is to be a little bit right here, and you notice I didn't do that. This is one of the few drives that I missed a bit left. So it was a tricky shot into the green. It's not as blind as it looks on the camera here, but I did pull it. You can see the flag waving in the middle, and I'm way off to the right. I'm now leaving myself too many of these long putts to try and leg up, and this is back-to-back holes where I've left that first putt way too short, and again, just missing on the par attempt, tap in bogey. That brings us to the 17th hole, which is a par 3, and this is a really nice shot. It's probably one of the nicest shots I've ever had on this hole. You can see I'm just left off to the flag there. It was a little draw in. If I could make this birdie, it would give me a great cushion going into the 18th hole. And I'm really happy that I didn't leave this one short, but it just missed off to the left side. So I tapped this one in for a par, and I need to par 18. So at this point, I know that I've played the type of game that I need to break 80. I've kept the ball in play, I've only had one 3-putt, and I've made a couple of really good approach decisions by not trying to get too aggressive on my shots, and just taking what the holes provided to me. I even did my pre-shot routine here, but I ended up pulling the ball, and I wish I could have done a better job on this tracer, because what it actually did is it hit a tree and kicked left into the rough, which is what that fist pump was all about. So the golf gods gave me a break, but as you can see here, as I set up to the ball and pump it once and twice and kind of 2.5 and a third time and kind of 3.5, I'm now unfortunately in my head, and I lost that pre-shot routine because I've put a little bit of pressure on myself to really try and par this hole. And I bladed off a little bit to the left, but I am close enough to the green I can pitch and putt for par here. And wouldn't you know it, after a really nice chip, I somehow leave a 6-foot par putt short. And although I didn't break 80, I am proud with the progress that I made today. It's time to get back to my practice putting mat so I don't leave so many short, and I need to stick to that pre-shot routine much more consistent than I've done. But thank you very much for watching this video. Please click like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next one.